second advisory council meeting. Happy to have you here. We've got almost full house and we've got a full agenda. So I'm going to pass it over to the chair, Director Gray, to get us going, and we'll stick to the agenda and we'll be on our way. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And welcome everybody. Thank you for those of you that attended the first meeting. Thank you for coming back. That's always a good sign. And for those of you that this is your first meeting, welcome. And thanks for coming. In the first meeting, we laid out a little bit of the total approach to the project and a little of the preliminary findings of the needs assessment. I think this afternoon, we're going to go a little deeper into that and talk about some of the other projects that are going on. Jared, I know you're working hot and heavy on updating the MRF, so we'll talk about where that sits a little bit. But everything seems to be moving along well. In terms of the General Assembly session, to no one's surprise, there really wasn't a lot of activity in this space, primarily because they're waiting for this report. And I think once we complete our work here and we feed that up, there'll be a lot of information and a lot of activity in the next General Assembly session. So I think we can all anticipate that. What I would like to do is open the meeting with our first action item, which is just to look at the minutes from the last meeting. And I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as proposed, and then we can, if that's seconded, then we can get into discussing any comments you might have.
So moved.
So moved. Second. All right. Any discussion on the minutes?
Terry, I had a question. Just there was some information. There was information that was presented in the deck that RS had, and I had submitted to you guys questions or some clarifications on some of those slides, since I presume they're going to become record. Maybe end up in the report. They weren't earth-shattering, but they were just sort of accuracy or clarifications. So I don't know what the proper way to root those in is.
I think when we get to discussion this afternoon, just reference it, and then it'll be on the record and reference on the stuff.
Okay, so they're not part of the minutes per se.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
No, they weren't part of the meeting. It was kind of like a separate communication. So
Okay.
So let's try and keep
Fair
those. You don't have to repeat them or read them or anything like that. Just reference some minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
Sure.
then they'll be good. That's fine. All right. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. The minutes are accepted. That's fine. Moving on, Jared, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Terry, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jared Rhodes, and I'm the Director of Policy and Programs for Rhode Island Resource Recovery Corporation. I'm going to keep my comments brief today so that we can have plenty of time for discussion. But by way of background, I wanted to kind of start by recognizing that Resource Recovery's materials recycling facility really has two primary components. There's the machinery that does the sorting and processing of the inbound mixed recycling stream. And there's also the building that houses all the machinery. And both of those pieces are really important to our assessment of where we're going and what to do next with the facility. Now, the building itself, that was initially constructed around 1987. It's had numerous additions since. It's had 40 years of hard service. We know that it needs some major repairs, that there's opportunities to make some significant improvements to that building. At the same time, the current machinery, that's been in service for about 15 years, and it was put in place during our last major upgrade. That equipment itself is nearing the end of its service life, and we know that its processing capacity really falls well below what industry standards allow to be achieved today. So with that said, the corporation is really at a decision point, right? We know that we want to ensure that the state has the benefit of the state-of-the-art facility, process as many recyclables as possible, serve as much landfill capacity as possible. The decision point, however, is what do we do? Do we pursue another upgrade of the existing facility, the existing building like we did last time? Or is it time for us to start from scratch and start all over and look at building on a greenfield site and really starting all over again. To assist in answering this question, we have gone out, we've contracted with an entity called RRT. RRT is out of Melville, New York, and they are certainly one of the leading MRF design and engineering firms in North America. At this point, I think they have been involved with the design and or construction of over 500 such facilities, and we clearly feel that they have the expertise to help us through this process. And right now, we're in phase one of that process. Our RRT has been working on this for a couple of months now, and I'm just going to run you down a quick little list of what the deliverables are expected to be. We expect to have these deliverables complete by September. This includes an assessment of the existing facilities condition and performance, a 20-year inbound material stream projection, a regional outbound commodities marketability analysis, an identification of the future processing performance targets for the new facility, and feasibility assessments for achieving those targets for both the existing facility upgrade option as well as the alternative of constructing a new facility. The final piece there will be a cost-benefit analysis that compares those two and positions our board of commissioners to make a decision as to what path that we're going to go down. And again, we hope to have that phase complete by September of this year, so that should be approaching quickly. Once phase one is complete, again, the corporation will make a decision to decide which way to go, and we will enter phase two of our project. Phase two has three primary components. That's preparing the 30% engineering plans and the specifications for the preferred alternative, identifying the necessary permitting requirements, and the production of the final procurement documents. From there, we'll enter phase three, which will focus on attaining the permits, contracting for, and ultimately the facility. As of right now, we don't have a detailed timeline for phase two and phase three. But our target right now is to have a contractor on board and to potentially be ordering the processing equipment by this time next year, with construction potentially completed in completed within 2028. So that's really the extent of the formal comments I had for you guys on where resource recovery is at with this initiative. I would, of course, be more than happy to try and answer any questions you have relative to that project.
Yeah, Jared, I have one question.
Sure.
And then we'll go to Jed, but, obviously we have two efforts going on in parallel here.
Yes.
And depending on the outcome of our effort and any General Assembly action, that could significantly impact the inbound materials load that you're looking at. How do we make sure we get alignment so that you're not spending money to build infrastructure that's going to be replaced by something else?
Absolutely. We've taken this into consideration. First and foremost, right now, we are moving forward. We don't feel it's time to wait because we're starting to get a sense of the benefits that we can achieve by building a new MRF. But as I mentioned, we don't expect to be going out to the actual procurement process till this time next year. And Terry, you had mentioned that there hasn't been a lot of legislative activity this year, but we expect that there will be a lot next year. So we should have an opportunity following the end of the session, if legislation were to be adopted, to revisit our capacity and our performance projections prior to going out to procurement to try and align those. But we really, at this point, don't see ourselves waiting much longer than this time next year to make a decision, given the status of the current MRF and what we lose every day that we're not benefiting from current processing capacity.
And my question was very similar to Terry's, and just whether or not your phase one analysis kind of allows for some flexibility for this question to get answered later about, are we going to do this or not? What's it going to look like? And it sounds like maybe you have baked in some flexibility to your process to account for this.
Yeah, it's primarily connected up with the calendar. But we are moving ahead. We don't want to just sit still and wait for this process to play out. Those of you who have been involved with these discussions know that they have literally been going on for years. Do want to continue moving forward.
Well, this report will be done by December 1st. So that'll give you a little lead time to think things through.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have been able to get the team at RRS in touch with our RT. They are interacting and coordinating. We've got those lines of communication between them with David's help.
Well, we are as we talk to each other.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions for Jared? Go ahead.
No.
Don't worry. All right, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, next up on our agenda, getting an update of the needs assessment from Rachel. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Yes, maybe I'll pass it to Risa to just start us off, and then we'll get into the deck.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a second. My name's Risa Domino. I'm a co-CEO at RRS, and just wanted to take a second to thank you all for the opportunity to do this really important work. We are very pleased to be sharing with you the results of the first phase of this work and the needs assessment, and really excited to get started on the next phase with the program plan, and looking forward to the group discussion on that as we get towards the end of this presentation. So just wanted to say that. Thanks to you all. Thanks for your time. And thanks for your trust in us to do this important work. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rachel to walk you through, Rachel and Maria to walk you through the needs assessment and launch our discussion on the next phase.
Thank you, Risa. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Director.
Great. So yes, my name is Rachel Perlman, and I'm joined by Maria Bianchetti. So we've both been working on this. So we'll be co-presenting here. So we'll be walking through the needs assessment, draft summary findings. So just a reminder here that these results are not yet final. It's possible some of these results may change with further review. So you can get on to the next slide. So the needs assessment we've carried out provides an overview of how recycling currently happens in the state of Rhode Island. So this slide is just showing some key pieces, which include waste characterization, desktop study, metrics on recycling access and inventory and collection methods, an estimation of recycling operational costs, recycling infrastructure analysis and market analysis, also a review of reuse and refill systems, and an evaluation of litter rates. So a lot of different components here looking at recycling, along with trash or waste, solid waste. So we'll get into that in the next slide. So this information is going to be familiar to a lot of you. Rhode Island is comprised of 5 counties with 39 communities. In 2020, the state had a population of about 1,097,000 households. So a lot of our analysis is at the household level. Solid waste and recycling is handled at the community level. As you know, each community has a unique collection system, including curbside collection, drop off at a transfer station or recycling center, or a combination. And folks we have in the room, RIDEM oversees the permitting, regulatory oversight, environmental enforcement, and all of that with the laws and regulation. And RIRRC, or Resource Recovery, is a quasi-public agency that's running the landfill, the state's only MRF, residential recycling area for material drop-off, and composting operations. This is just kind of an overview of the system, which you're probably familiar with. You can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Rachel. So some more information you are probably familiar with, but we really wanted to break down the solid waste material streams in Rhode Island into the 2 separate streams, the municipal waste stream and the ICI waste stream, or the industrial, commercial, institutional, ICI for short. So first, the municipal waste stream, that is comprised of municipal generators, including single-family households and multi-unit residential buildings under each community's predetermined service limit. So for example, some communities service households with up to 4 units under their municipal waste stream. Some do up to 8, some have no limit, etc. Materials collected as part of the municipal waste stream are required by law to be delivered to resource recovery facilities. And this municipal waste stream recycling, when it goes to the resource recovery MRF, is processed or tipped free of charge to the community. So the municipal waste stream incurs no tipping cost. And then it's disposed at the central landfill at a subsidized rate compared to the ICI waste. On the other side of the waste stream, the ICI stream, this includes single-family households and communities without the municipal waste stream service, multi-unit residential buildings above each community's determined service level cutoff, and then all other commercial, industrial, and institutional generators. And then some of those communities that fall under this stream type would be single-family households in communities like Exeter, Westerly, and West Greenwich, just for some examples. The majority of ICI material is processed at out-of-state facilities, although some of it does come to resource recovery facilities to be processed. If that material does come to the resource recovery facilities, it does have a higher disposal and processing cost rate at those facilities. It's not tipped for free at the MRF. There is a cost per ton for that process. And ICI waste collection and diversion is overseen through state laws, policies, and regulations. And really understanding the breakout of these two waste streams is important for the context of the rest of the project, the program plan, and understanding the state of Rhode Island as a whole and the larger systems and associated costs. So this chart has a flow of a breakdown of material generated in Rhode Island in 2024 and their final management destination. So we'll take it sort of one piece at a time. Looking at the municipal MSW value and the top, the brown value there, you'll see 322,000 tons of material going to the resource recovery landfill being picked up as trash waste by under that municipal waste stream sector. But then if you go 2 notches lower and you see the blue line, the municipal recycling line, you'll see the brown line coming off of that line that represents about 29,000 tons of material that was collected in the municipal recycling stream, but is then rejected for recycling and disposed of as trash. And that gives us a total of 352,000 tons of municipal material disposed in the resource recovery landfill in 2024. And then on that same blue municipal recycling line, you see another brown line go off of that into the landfill area. We'll talk about this number in more detail in a future slide, but this is the material that is processed at the material recovery facility or the MRF as residue material. So it's not processed or it's not sent to end markets for recycling. That total sent to end markets for recycling is about 62,000 tons in 2024. And then I just want to touch on the ICI data as well, the industrial, commercial, and institutional material. Well, there's some ICI data included in this flow chart. This is not representative of all ICI data and all ICI tonnage in the state of Rhode Island due to additional unknown values. For example, a lot of this type of recycling is done through business-to-business activities such as baled cardboard done in-house and sold directly to an end market. And you can see this across all management streams, including trash, recycling, and compostable material. The next few slides use that tonnage, so that 352,000 tons of municipal waste, and then the estimated ICI waste stream, again, because we don't know the full picture based on ICI material not coming to the resource recovery landfill, but it takes that about estimated 673,000 tons of material generated in 2024 in Rhode Island, and it uses that tonnage and waste composition studies, waste characterization studies done by similar states to estimate the composition of Rhode Island's disposal stream. And I know this is a very high level picture, and I'll say a lot more context about the methodology of this process and the data we use, and more detailed charts will be available in the full report to read in more detail, and we're happy to answer any questions about that. But the main takeaway from this slide is understanding that about 34% of the material in the disposal stream, so right now this is only showing material that's going to the trash, is classified as paper, plastic, glass, or metal. And another piece of that waste composition and waste characterization study that we did was understanding, looking at that pie chart of the material that's going to the trash, how could that material be potentially managed instead to be diverted from the MSW, from the waste stream. So we typically break materials into 4 categories, and then we assign each material a potential management method of recoverability. So the first is MRF compatible materials, and that makes about 20% of the trash stream in 2024 in Rhode Island. These are items that could be collected single stream or commingled either through curbside or drop-off collection programs. These are items like plastic water bottles, paper, glass, metal, etc. Drop-off compatible material makes up 33% of the disposal stream. These are items that could be collected to be recycled, but they cannot be effectively sorted at a MRF from other commodities and need to be collected source separated. So these are things like bulky waste, pallets, plastic film bags, things that do have recoverability and end markets, but just do not move through a MRF based on their size or other constraints. The compostable program compatible material includes organics such as yard waste, brush, compostable paper. This makes up about 20% of the disposal stream. And then the last potential management method is a food scrap compatible material. That's food scraps or wasted food that could be processed either through curbside or drop-off programs, but cannot be commingled with recyclable materials. And then the last value we have here is the non-recoverable materials. And those are the materials that just cannot be recovered from the waste stream. And if there were to be a reduction, it would be through things like prevention and a reduction as opposed to diversion. Pass it back to you, Rachel.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'll just say that you'll all receive a copy of these slides afterwards. I know we're presenting a lot of numbers, so you will be able to look at these more closely later. So here we're just showing the beverage case tax data. So Rhode Island does not currently have a bottle bill program, but does collect information on quantities of cases and units of beverages sold via the beverage case tax, which is 8 cents on every case of beverage containers sold by a wholesaler to a beverage retailer or consumer within the state. So this table is showing the number of cases and total beverage containers by year for the different volumetric sizes. And as far as how this plays into our analysis, this data is limited as far as what it can show us, but might be of use. So for the purposes of the needs assessment and the upcoming modeling of a deposit return system, the beverage case tax data does not distinguish by container material, such as glass, metal, or plastic, but it does still provide a number of containers. So we may still end up using this data in some way supplemented with other information for the program plan analysis. And then here we have just a snapshot of solid waste collection service access. All households in Rhode Island have access to both curbside collection and drop-off for recycling and trash, but how households get this service differs. The top pie chart is showing how trash is collected, and the bottom is showing how recycling is collected. The majority of households have service through contracts and the franchise model of collection. And then you can also see there's municipal and subscription and the no municipal curbside service, which, just for clarity, that 8% with no municipal service, curbside service, has service through the ICI waste stream. Okay, and here we have show a number of, so we did a lot of various cost analyses. We show a number of costs related to collection, disposal, and processing across the Rhode Island waste stream. This uses 2025 resource recovery data and survey results from municipalities. So the collection data was provided by some Rhode Island communities, but not all. And the averages here represent a combination of costs for trash, recycling, and yard waste for municipally collected, contracted, and subscription. Subscription programs were the most costly collection model, so such that the $166 per ton, there on the top left, drops to $144 per ton when you exclude subscription programs. And I'll also point out that there was no ICI specific cost data for Rhode Island. So we used New York surveys of businesses and estimated costs to be $500 per month on average for ICI. But we recognize that costs for the ICI sector tend to vary widely because of the different ways services can be provided, both in terms of size of container and frequency of collection. And then we have here disposal, tipping fees at an average of $85 per ton, $167 per ton for recycling processing at the MRF, and an average of $32 per ton, an average for organics processing. So these numbers these metrics and similar ones will carry through throughout the program plan assessment to see how costs change under various scenarios.
Like Rachel said, you will get these slides after, so that's why we wanted to include some heavy text on this slide. But the gist of this slide is that the collection of solid waste in Rhode Island is supported by infrastructure, whether it's through transfer stations, which consolidate and collect material to move it to larger vehicles for final disposal, the material recovery facility, which we just heard Jared speak about, and more information about the MRF will be covered in that evaluation study completed by RRT. And then the organics facilities, there are a few kinds of composting facilities in the state and one anaerobic digester in the state. Organics facilities in Rhode Island do not appear to currently accept compostable products, and that's defined as material like compostable utensils, food containers. We have a full description of that in the full needs assessment as well. And they do not appear to currently accept them. Okay, and this is what we were talking about earlier when we were looking at the flow chart. It was that first brown line that was moving off of the recycling stream contamination. So this is the material that is collected as recycling in the state, but is too contaminated to be recycled and is instead disposed of as trash. And resource recovery sets minimum quality standards for incoming material loads related to contamination, moisture content, and prohibited items. Loads being transported to the MRF can be rejected in two ways. They can be route rejected, so that's rejected prior to being delivered to the MRF, with this decision being made by the recycling truck drivers in communication with community staff, or it can be rejected once it's tipped on the floor at the MRF, due to not meeting those minimum quality standards. And in between 2021 and 2025, an average of 23% of municipal recycling was rejected and disposed of as trash at the landfill. This is that second line that we were looking at in the flow chart. So this is representing the MRF residue. The MRF residue accounts for the fraction of accepted material that is not sorted into commodities and disposed of as waste. This may be non-recyclable material or recyclable material that is not captured due to contamination or other factors. And between 2021 and 2025, an average of 23% of the material processed at the MRF was identified as residue. For this slide, I would like to go over just briefly the end markets analysis that we completed on commodities that move, you know, from curbside bin to the truck to the MRF and then to their finished commodity where they're sold to end markets. For items to be recycled, yep, they must be baled into commodities for sale to recycling end markets. I will say there's a much more in-depth analysis in the full needs assessment report, but today I'm just going to go over very briefly a few high-level materials. So for plastics, natural HDPE #2, which is the material that is used in the production of milk jugs, for example, they remains a relatively valuable and supply-constrained recycled resin, especially for bottling and packaging applications. And this is the highest commodity value for recycled plastics. And then historically low virgin PET prices, and PET is the material used to make plastic water bottles, and competition from low-cost imported recycled PET have resulted in a weakened pricing for recycled PET, increasing uncertainty for processors of PET in the state, and in the country. In 2024, plastic bales from the Resource Recovery MRF were sent to regional and North American end markets. OCC, or old corrugated cardboard, used to make boxes, cardboard containers, it remains one of the strongest and most established recovered fiber commodities because it's the primary feedstock for container board and corrugated packaging. Demand has remained relatively stable over the past few years because mills in the United States continue to depend on this feedstock. Another type of paper, mixed paper, which is things like junk mail, envelopes, newspaper, like other items like that, have established domestic end market, especially in packaging applications, but prices have dropped significantly over the past year, maybe perhaps indicating softer demand for that material. And in 2024, paper bales from the Resource Recovery MRF were sent to northeastern end markets. For metal, used beverage cans, or UBC for short, remain one of the strongest and most established recycling commodities due to strong domestic demand and well-developed can, sheet, and rolling infrastructure. And this remains one of the main revenue generating commodities for MRFs across the region and the country. Recently, in 2024, baled metal commodities as a whole were sent to end markets in the state of Rhode Island and northeastern end markets as well. And then glass, finally sorted in mixed recycling stream at the MRF, remain on site and is beneficially reused as alternate daily cover at the central landfill. This is aligned with a 2023 NERC, Northeastern Recycling Council Coalition, I'm never sure which one, sorry, report found that the Northeast region lacks secondary glass processing, and as a result, most glass is going to landfills as ADC. So again, a lot more information about each type of material in the full needs assessment. And this really quickly, another piece of the needs assessment we looked at was packaging reuse systems in Rhode Island. Under the needs assessment definition, reuse is defined as the return of a packaging to the marketplace and the continued use of that material by a producer or service provider, with some details about what conditions are in place. So reuse can mean a lot of different things, especially like in education and outreach. But in the case of this needs assessment, it doesn't include things like me as a consumer bringing my own reusable bag to the grocery store. It means more things that are defined by the marketplace and things that could be continually reused, which we'll go over some examples. So commercial scale reuse is an emerging business model in the state, but most of the systems are concentrated in like enclosed environments like college campuses, event venues, and some examples of shipping application. So colleges that have reuse programs, those typically look like dining hall services. So they would use a container like the one we see on the left here instead of a styrofoam container or a plastic or paper to go container. And they would receive that when they got their food, and then they'd have places to return it on campus. And then when they go back to the dining hall, they'd get a new container, rinse and repeat. Some of the colleges that use these types of services include Providence, RISD, Bryant University, and more. And I also have a picture here of a road race because there are several running races in the state of Rhode Island that have switched to reusable cups instead of paper cups for their hydration services. And then events like Newport Folk and Jazz Festivals also prohibit single-use plastics as well, encouraging reuse. And the last slide I have is about current litter rates in the state. So there are many organizations and cleanup efforts across the state that work to address litter, and many materials that are collected as litter would or could be covered materials under an EPR or DRS program. We just have some data here from Save the Bay annual cleanup reports. They determine the percentage of total litter by pieces collected during Save the Bay cleanups. They have grouped materials into categories. For example, eating contains materials like takeout containers, plastic utensils. Drinking includes things like plastic bottles, glass bottles, caps, straws. And they were able to determine what percent of total pieces each material type took up, but we also were able to take that data and some estimates from other studies to determine the tons of litter collected by each material type, and we estimate that in 2025, 17% of the litter collected by weight in this cleanup were categorized as drinking materials. Pass it back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, so and that kind of last statistic kind of shows some of the reason folks are interested in a bottle bill and looking at can that reduce litter potential. So this slide is showing our draft gaps across the recycling and waste system. So these are still evolving as we're finalizing the numbers and highlighting the gaps across the current system. So under the minor and moderate gaps, some communities only have curbside recycling service through opting in. So this is an extra step for households to not automatically provide service. So potential to increase convenience and participation through more automatic service provision. The frequency of recycling collection is not always consistent with trash collection. So in 11 of the communities, they have curbside trash collection weekly, but receive curbside recycling collection every other week. So there's an opportunity to pair that consistency depending on incentives there. A variety of carts and bins are used for curbside recycling collection service currently. So to help communities save money, improve safety, divert more material from the landfill, and increase program participation rates, the state could consider seeking harmonizing all collection to a cart-based system. So recycling carts ideally should be the same size, should all be the same size, and to encourage access to recycling that would be in line with access to trash. The next one here, some curbside collection programs rely on manual vehicles. So the collection best practices include using automated collection vehicles where possible, although it can depend on the exact geography and space constraints to encourage collection and employee safety and increase the number of households served daily. Sorry, I just lost my place here. Yeah, so that's a possible improvement there. Municipal recycling and diversion rates are not frequently met. So many municipalities are not achieving the state requirement to reach a recycling rate of 35% and a diversion rate of 50%. So this is based on the 2024 and 2025 RIRRC municipal data summaries, like how is my city and town doing reports. So that's all these targets were created with intention, and so state level support or refined policy or cost structure might be needed to achieve these targets. Lack of end markets and possibly processing technologies are limiting the quantity and types of materials that can be recycled. So the lack of end markets and processing technologies, so what this relates to is the materials that are not examples of materials not currently captured or processed for recycling at the MRF include aseptic and gable top cartons, paper cups, and other polycoated paper, along with other materials. And not recycling these and likely other materials may be a missed opportunity for material recovery and diversion. And this does relate to the study RRT is doing, so we'll continue to be in touch with them on the MRF upgrade or the MRF upgrade study, or to see if it like a larger redo will be needed. And then under the high impact gaps, glass is among the collected materials that are not currently being recycled. So as Maria said, currently glass is being used as alternate daily cover for landfill. So there may be opportunities to recycle residential and ICI glass through other paths. And this is something that could potentially be addressed with EPR or DRS system through separate collection or redemption to collect higher quality glass for recycling. The second one here, the ICI recycling tonnages are unknown due to data caps. So you've kind of heard this throughout the presentation. So there's a minimal amount of ICI material is processed at the MRF with the assumption that the remainder of the recycling is being transported out of state for processing, or is being backhauled or processed internally at larger commercial businesses. But this data gap likely represents a meaningful portion of the generation and recycling of paper and packaging material in the state. So having a handle on that is important for tracking and identifying opportunities to maximize recovery and diversion. And lastly, there is currently no common or widespread infrastructure to support reuse and refill. So outside of the university systems and events that you just heard about that have adopted reusable food serviceware, the state has limited reuse and refill programs to replace disposable packaging, paper products, and beverage containers. So to encourage avoidance of waste through reuse of materials, reuse-focused policies could be established. There could be a network of convenient drop-off sites and wash facilities that could be created to collect and recirculate reusables. And the existing drop-off network for hard-to-recycle materials could potentially be used, or a possible future network for a DRS system with those locations could be paired with drop-off of reusables. So this is kind of a snapshot of gaps and more to come in this area as we think ahead to the program plans. Go to the next slide. Next we'll kind of share as we transition to the program plan analysis. What we'll be analyzing is the as-is system in the state. A lot of that relates to the needs assessment that you just have heard about. We'll be comparing that with 4 other systems, so kind of 5 systems in total. The second follows the systems described in the 2025 bill with a combined EPR and DRS program. Also an EPR standalone analysis, DRS or bottle bill system standalone analysis, and then a 5th one that is currently under discussion based on what we've learned from the needs assessment. And there will be a number of different components that we're looking at as we compare these 5 systems. So some of these things are listed here. So we'll provide kind of a summary, qualitative summary of the key elements of these 5 systems. One of the outputs will be a SWOT analysis looking at the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities of these different systems, the needs for these systems, the timetables across an implementation schedule, the impacts, which we'll talk a little bit more in the subsequent slides, and the cost benefit analysis, looking at system level costs and costs to various stakeholders. So the 5 program options will be defined with a specific set of parameters or inputs. So these include a lot of the things here. So kind of just giving you a window into how we're thinking about this. So we'll be, these things will may vary across the 5 systems. So the materials covered by the programs. So that would obviously differ for an EPR program or a DRS program. So a DRS program would include beverage containers. An EPR program would not if paired, if the two were paired together. In the collection method, various collection methods, how does that change across these systems? Convenience standards, which would be perhaps higher convenience standards with DRS and EPR related to drop-off or curbside service, the existence and role of a PRO, requirements for recycling rates and performance targets, possibly post-consumer recycled content requirements in an EPR law, and how that would change end markets and the possible recyclability of certain materials and feasibility, the existence of alternative collection programs for specialty materials that are harder to recycle currently, the anticipated quality of certain streams and how that might change, for instance, the quality of glass being higher under a DRS system, fee structure and how and the kind of how that carries through and impacts costs throughout the system into different players. And then the ultimate responsible party for trash costs, recycling costs, and compost costs. So as we get further along, you'll kind of be able to see quantitative numbers associated with these things, and we're currently working on that. So more soon on these. And then the next slide shows some of the outputs. So when comparing the 5 scenarios, a suite of performance metrics will be evaluated based on the projected impacts of the system under each of the respective policy options. So these may include materials diverted. So what are the quantities of materials reused, recycled, and composted under these scenarios? Material flows and destinations, what types of facilities are these materials going to? Expected contamination rates for different streams, litter quantities and composition, consumer convenience for recycling and redemption where applicable, greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll be looking at some environmental and cost impacts along with kind of the material flow metrics, and economic impact system-wide and by stakeholder group where possible. As I said, was part of the cost benefit analysis, which is the subsequent task, but will be going on in kind of closely with the program plan work. And the impacts on local and regional end markets, and lastly, recycling and reuse infrastructure and markets. So a lot of different variables at play that we're looking to track across these systems to provide recommendations ultimately. So with that, we open it to discussion and I pass it back to you, Terry.
Thank you. Actually, we're going to do a real quick update from Dave on the upcoming public ranger gathering.
Yep. So a week from today, we'll be hosting a public input workshop. We'll be doing 2 of these. One will be from 12 to 2 in this room, where we'll do a high-level presentation on the project to solicit public input. We'll also be doing one from 6 to 8 p.m. In the evening on Teams, where we'll be doing the same presentation and asking for public input. Tomorrow, I'll provide you some a little one-pager that you can send out to your network to share with them. You know, we want to make certain that we haven't missed anything. You know, we've been really, you know, the 2-year Joint Legislative Commission really had tremendous amounts of public input that shaped where we are today. But we do want to make certain that we give an opportunity for public input. So that's coming up next week. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
So
What day, Dave? Yeah, you're gonna send an email with that?
I'll send it out tomorrow.
Okay.
But it's July 21st. 12 to 2 in person, right here, and then 6 to 8 in the evening online. Yep, same day.
all right, open discussion. Some of you.
I have another question on that. Is there going to be another public? Nothing new is on the table, obviously, since all of the hearings, all of the meetings of the 2-year session, of the 2-year, meeting. It seems like with the new information coming down the pipe from RIRRC, needs assessment program plan, is there going to be a public opportunity to comment on that at some point in the future?
Yeah, I think so. Right? I mean, in the fall, as we move, as as completes their program plans, yeah, it's going to be a public hearing.
Okay.
Required by law.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay. Because I don't think we're probably going to learn a lot new. Given that the forces that have been beaten over this issue over the last decade, this is new information. That seems like that would be more productive for the public.
So we want to keep people up to speed on what's happened so far too.
Fair.
And then we'll circle around at the end. And then, of course, there'll be all kinds of legislative next spring as well. All right. Any other open discussion pieces that you want to talk about on either the needs of the.
Sure. Yeah. So John Berard, Beyond Plastics. I did have a question, and thank you for the really thorough presentation here. Just one thing that I noticed on the last 2 slides, you're talking about the program options and parameters and performance metrics. One thing that is omitted, I noticed, is that in the 7 EPR programs that currently exist, there are mandated packaging reduction requirements. And so, they're explicit in the California bill, and then they're required for the PRO to develop them in the other 6 programs. So just, wanted to note that when you're coming up with your list of metrics and variables, that if there is an EPR program implemented or suggested, that there should and hopefully will be mandated reduction, packaging reduction requirements in that program.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, that list is definitely not complete. It was kind of a starting list. So yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And Risa can jump in here as well if helpful.
Yeah, I think we'll follow the parameters in the legislation for that evaluation. And so so we'll look at what the legislative requirements are with waste reduction and do our best to model that out.
Other comment, Jim?
Thanks, Terry. On one of the early slides, you referenced the state's recycling target of 35%. I think your slide referred to that as being the target for municipal solid waste. I would double check the statute, and I'll yield to, I guess, Terry or maybe Jared on this, but I'm pretty sure that the statute says that 35% of all waste generated in the state shall be recycled. So I would say that that's not exclusive to just MSW. I think the industrial commercial waste is included in that 35%. So that's just a point of clarification maybe to check on. And then my question is for the, when you were going over kind of the end market analysis for the different recyclable materials, and you talked about kind of what the market is or isn't for PET, for glass. Just to clarify, that was just looking at the way that that material is currently processed in our current system. So obviously, glass collected in a bottle bill system, plastic collected in a bottle bill system would have different potential end markets. Is that something that you'll look at in the next step of the process as you're thinking about the respective program plans? I just want to make sure that at some point you guys are going to kind of look at those relative differences between what can happen with this material through a MRF system, and then what can happen to the material, what the value is going through a bottle bill system.
Yeah, that'll definitely be addressed. There are a couple of differences, glass being the most significant one in terms of value and access to end markets. And then there's other differences in terms of yield loss and that sort of thing in MRF processed materials versus bottle bill materials. So all of that will be addressed in the modeling for the program plans.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the issue of the ICI, sort of the sparseness of the ICI data, so kind of what's the solution there? Is the solution extrapolation based on, real waste, actual waste comp data, not desktop, but actual waste comp data that's been done around the region? Or is it we don't have everything and we just are going to acknowledge that we don't have everything?
Is that a question for us or for the?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I can't tell who's looking at who. Yeah, I think we'll do our best, and Rachel probably can jump in here, and Maria, but we'll do our best to, again, estimate what's out there. I think what it points to in the long term is that the state would benefit from better reporting and data gathering, and a good policy moving forward would incorporate those kinds of requirements. But given where we're at, we will do our best to estimate and model that based on the information we have and information we have on bordering states or states of similar size and demographics. I don't know, Maria or Rachel, if you have anything to add to that.
I think that's right. Yeah, we can supplement with data from other northeastern states, but yeah, agreed with the long-term solution of collecting that data to have accurate data over time for the state of Rhode Island.
I'm thinking like Delaware, which has a really good ICI collection methodology and has for decades. And where there's the non-municipally run recycling systems, you've got households potentially under EPR who are in the ICI bin, and we want to make sure we know what the universe of that residential material is that would be captured under EPR if the pro was funding all the recycling and you weren't counting on people doing, certain subscription systems. So that seems like we don't want to lose that tonnage because somebody's not reporting it because it's getting hauled somewhere else.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, as said, we'll do our best with the data we have, and thanks for the suggestion on Delaware. That's a good option for us to look at.
And on the beverage container tax numbers, which were really interesting, kind of what's the supplement on sort of beverage container universe for the state in terms? I mean, that tax data, obviously, there's probably a ton of non-compliance on that. Kind of what else are you looking to for that to come up with those numbers?
Well, we'd love for folks around the table like yourself and others who have estimates and data and are willing to share that. I think, as you know, we've done these types of studies and analyses for a number of other states. And so we have some estimates that we've used on containers per capita and that sort of thing, which we might use to truth check that information. There's the beverage market data, analytics data that's out there. So we'll be looking at a variety of those sources, given time and budget constraints, probably trying to pull predominantly from data that we have in-house or data that you all are able to share with us or other experts in the field are able to share with us. But we'll be looking at, what we've seen in terms of what we can figure from waste composition data, from sales data in similar states. And then we have the whole issue of the breakout of the different container types and the material types, since the data on gives us just units from the tax data. So we're going to try to solve both of those problems with some of the other sources we've got, but definitely open to ideas from folks in the room on where that data might be accessible or if there's information that you could share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I get hives about the beverage marketing stuff.
I know you do.
Rhode Island is not comparable to Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland and the rest of the region. So, but, you know, we've got Maine and we've got Connecticut with basically comprehensive bottle bills. You know, those numbers are pretty decent. We have some stuff, I have some stuff we may be able to help with the package mix on. So, yeah, so we sort of stay in touch on that.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think package mix and probably per capita generation rates would be what we'd be looking at. I don't know, Rachel or Maria, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, we can, I think, well, let's follow up. But yeah, I think package mix would be very helpful, and per capita generation rates, there might be some other information too.
I don't want to keep laughing. I got more questions, but.
Well, you wanted to reference the email that you.
Yeah, so I had sent a note into DEM about a couple of the slides from last time. There were some things on some of the deposit slides that I just wanted to correct or comment on, and there were clarifications. And I wanted just, because we may see those again. And so I wanted to make sure that I got those in, and I wanted to do that in the right sort of forum. So I don't know if that's something I should convey to DEM to convey to you, or what my process is for that.
Well, you sent it in already, so now it'll be reflected in the minutes and we can distribute it along with it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's great. And then the other piece of it relates to litter. And I saw you did you had the piece counts from the local sampling from the cleanups. And then there was a thing about weight conversion. Have you talked to KAB about the 2025 study that they just finished?
Rachel, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So we, in the full needs assessment report, we have an analysis also of Keep America Beautiful data from the most recent report, scaled down to Rhode Island, which has some different categories. But yeah, we kind of have both side by side, I believe, right, Maria? Or both are in the report? Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, because there's also the 2025 survey, which is not been written up yet. I have the raw data for it, but it's not written up yet. They added coastal as a component. So there's roadway, waterway, which we had them at waterway in 2020, and now they've added coastal. And so there's some really interesting stuff that's come out of that. Again, I can't share that yet, but ABA pays for a lot of that, but we don't get too much with it. So but anyway, there's just some really interesting stuff in there. It speaks to sort of the intensity of beverage containers in coastal environments, but it also speaks to the fact that it's still it's a teeny tiny part of what's in the coastal plastics. So it's just interesting new data on coastal stuff. So
Great. Yeah, we'd love to see that if you can share it.
Yeah, if you're in touch with David at KAB, he's their research director. I can give you the contact. It's in my memo, which you can share. They can share with you guys.
Great.
And my sort of a corollary to all of this is I want to put a bid in for the bingo card on the fifth option out there. And just to sort of throw it out there as a possibility, there are some really good EPR programs in the world that also have litter control programs as part of them. The Europeans do it almost universally. Manitoba pioneered a program in Canada 30 years ago that has extensive public space recycling and education. They get 80% beverage container recovery out of that EPR system without a deposit. And it addresses all the litter. It isn't just the beverage container litter. So we call it EPR plus, but it's basically EPR with a litter control and prevention component melded into it. So the pro is not only responsible for the recycling piece, they're also responsible for running litter control. And again, it's not beverage containers, it's not, whatever, it's everything. And similar to the way EPR works, where all of the people who contribute to waste pay for the recycling, all of the people who contribute to the litter control program. So it's different proportions than it is for the recycling, because what ends up in litter is not the same as what ends up in litter. So there's some great models. It is pretty ubiquitous in Europe these days, and is certainly, Manitoba is still the gold standard, or Ontario was supposed to adopt it. And then they went off on their deposit jag, and then they went off their deposit jag. So they didn't ultimately do it, but I recommend it to you for consideration.
Thank you. Any other comments? Good, go ahead.
Just a quick comment on the litter thread. I appreciate that you guys included the Save the Bay data, but just want to note, that's a kind of a limited data set. That's really just a snapshot in time. It's a handful of cleanup locations on a given day. I think that the percentages of the whole would probably be safe to extrapolate that out in terms of what it would look like if you did a litter cleanup everywhere, every single day. But the gross numbers, I think, it's a little harder to extrapolate that out. And obviously, I think it varies based on whether you're looking at the number of items collected, the weight of those items collected, the volume of the items collected. You're going to kind of get different percentages of the whole based on how you're measuring that. I think looking at the Keep America Beautiful data and trying to somehow reconcile that with the Save the Bay data. In a perfect world, we would have some better, more scientific litter data, but that just doesn't exist. It's a very hard thing to quantify, but it's also I would argue, a very, very important piece of the whole discussion, because if we're looking at cost benefit of this policy versus that policy, the potential litter reduction benefit is I would say extremely important, but the hard part is that it's very hard to quantify that. Because we just don't have good data. So we know that there's a lot of microplastic in the bay, but we don't know how much of that comes from beverage containers that break down. So, what's the economic value of the microplastic that would be reduced if you had a bottle bill, for example? We don't know. And nobody's ever going to be able to probably put an actual dollar amount on that, unfortunately. So I'm just, I guess, just acknowledging that gap in the data that exists, and it is probably always going to exist as we're trying to talk about cost and benefit at the same time.
Yeah, those points make a lot of sense to me, and agreed on the Save the Bay data in terms of how we translated it to tonnage as absolute tons only reflects what was collected at the event, not the total tonnage that exists littered. But the composition we think will be helpful in combination with Keep America Beautiful data. And can be something that can be used to compare, estimate how composition of litter would change across different policies. But yes, understood the importance of the potential litter reduction benefit, and we'll give additional thought to how we can portray that with some limited data. But if anyone has additional ideas on that, we do welcome that.
Go ahead.
I just had a thought on, I think that at some point you recommended automatic side loaders as a way to increase recycling, or as a gap that some communities were using automatic side loaders. And I think I was surprised. I think the experience that Providence has had, and I'm not deep in the weeds on this, but my understanding is that when we went to automatic side loaders, we really lost the ability to kind of do bin by bin audits of what was in a cart and avoid tipping contaminated carts into our trash trucks, which resulted in our recycling rate kind of plummeting down to a state low of about 3%. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that we have a low recycling rate, but it does seem like automatic side loaders are beneficial from a, like you said, efficiency standpoint. You can get to more houses in a shorter number of time. And a cost standpoint, you don't need to have two drivers on or two people on a truck, let's say. And I'm sure there are trade-offs here, but just as like a silver bullet to increase the amount of recyclable material being captured. I'm not sure how that all balances out, and that it's actually super beneficial from a recycling standpoint, because like I said, you just can't, you don't know what's in the cart until it's tipped. And in Providence, we found what's tipped is often not something you want in the truck. So I don't know how relevant that is even to the EPR and bottle bill conversation, but just something that I was triggered by in the conversation what I shared.
Yeah, I think the importance, one of the important pieces of a new policy framework is resources that could be dedicated towards education and outreach and engagement. And that tends to be the best pathway for reducing contamination and increasing participation. And so I think in terms of how that would fit into our approach and our modeling here is we'd assume, pretty significant investment in education with EPR, for example, and then look at based on some best practice out there and some documentation on the impacts of education and outreach and engagement best practices, then what that might do in terms of increasing tonnages and reducing contamination.
Any other points from the council?
So just a quick
Yeah.
question. What's the mechanism for responding to the needs assessment once we get it?
Good question. To be concerned. That's, I'm gonna work on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Dave and I will.
Okay. Yeah, it's a long time till the next meeting.
Right,
And we'll
exactly.
have the benefit cost analysis.
No, I'm sticking to that. Talking, there's definitely a gap there, so
Yeah.
we'll fix that and then play,
Okay.
what the solution is. But
There's a real quick question about those end markets on recycling. Sort of having some information, but is the sense that my sense has always been like high value is aluminum, clean cardboard, and that we've seen stuff like mixed plastics given a lot of the residues or mixed PET, and that there seems to be certain recyclable markets that we're seeing continue to stay steady or increase, and certain recyclable markets that have really hit the floor. Are some of those, like to Jed's point before, specific to like, we get mixed colored glass, so a MRF with colored glass, the best use is landfill cover, but is that gonna change if you separate it by color of glass? I guess part of what I want to understand is like, what, and maybe this is not the time for it, but which of those end use markets, like as we project forward, there's more sense that like, okay, that's gonna be a solid market to invest infrastructure in versus a market where like virgin plastic is always gonna be cheap. So, mixed oily plastics are never gonna have a market no matter how clean that stream is separated. It's like, that's something I understand it more for the organic side, but I know for the commodities market, that's a whole different piece.
Well, I think there are a few different things at play. And one thing that's important to distinguish is demand from price. And I know in like a conventional commodity market, high demand means high price. That's not how recycling markets necessarily work. That price demand connection isn't always there. So there can be demand and the price can be low. And there's still a value to recovering that material, and recycling markets are cyclical. So PET's in the toilet right now, but it was 30 cents a pound a couple years ago, and you don't want to change your investment every time the market goes up or down. So we would recommend taking a longer view. Looking at these markets over a 5-year period is typically what we look at when we look at pricing trends. So that you capture some of those highs and lows. There's other work you can do, other policies you can do that support end markets, that support the better prices and things like that through minimum recycled content requirements and things of that nature that bolster those end markets to keep the prices more stable. But I think we'll be looking at what markets exist, so what facilities exist in the United States or internationally that can use these materials, and then pricing is secondary. because like I said, prices are volatile. And you can't turn on and off your recycling program every time the international commodity markets change, whether it's because virgin resin prices are really low or there was a tsunami that wiped out a facility and all of a sudden prices are high. Like the programs can't respond in that way. And so we need to look at where there's been consistent demand over time and where we think that demand is developing, and use that to advise you on kind of what materials might make sense to be in or out. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
No, that's super helpful.
Okay, thanks, Leo. Any other comments from the council? Questions? All right, I think we'll open it up to anyone else that has any comments or questions. Anyone in the room? Nope. Anyone online? Sarah, Susan, rather.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you for that. I have a question. Rachel, I thought I heard you say that there's an opportunity for cartons as they're not currently recycled. I think maybe you meant they're not pulled out as grade 52. The Rhode Island Resource Recovery website indicates they are accepted. So I'm thinking they are recycled. They're just recycled in mixed paper. Can you clarify that?
Sure. My understanding is that they are accepted at the facility, but they're not currently getting recycled. But it would be great if Jared could confirm that.
Rachel, you're exactly correct. And as you know, this was a question you posed to me not too long ago, and we brought it to our facility manager, and that is in fact the answer. They're not getting baled and sorted separately, and most likely they're not put up into the mixed recycling, the mixed paper bales. But to Race's earlier comment, we try not to change the guidance that we're giving too often because it just makes it very unwieldy to run the programs. What we're starting to hear through the work that RRT is doing is that they will truly be an opportunity for us in our next work.
So currently, if you don't mind me asking, so currently they are not running into mixed paper. The default is they go into residue and are disposed. Is that what you're saying?
I believe that is the case, Susan. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. We have two things that are kind of out there. One is the two public meetings. They're going to be exactly the same. So if you attend one, you probably don't need to attend both unless you're really looking for something to do, which is a possibility. The other piece is we need to follow up and figure out a good communication and engagement methodology between now and the next meeting, because I think there's going to be a good amount of activity going on there, and we want to keep in touch. So and get that feedback. So Dave and I will work on that, and we'll get something out in the next few days on an approach for that. Hearing that, I think we're through the agenda. So just entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you. Second. All right. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you. Adjourn.
Thanks, everyone. We look forward to your comments.
Pretty good, guys.
Thank you.
How's it going?
That I had